Hello, folks. Welcome. This is Inside the Leader's Mind, where what's in the way becomes the way. I'm your host, David Susan, and I am so excited to have my guest with me today, Nick Turner. Nick is the CEO of Dreamdata. He has nearly 20 years of commercial leadership experience in marketing technology, and just this year, he took on his first CEO role at Dreamdata, who just raised their $55 million Series B funding, and they help marketers to become the heroes of their organization. And we're going to look at that, and I'm going to ask about that. And Nick specializes in joining early stage MarTech companies and helping them scale with single digit millions to 50 million in revenue. And when he's not helping marketers, he spends all of his time with his wife, Leanne, and his two sons, Conlon and Jack. Nick, welcome.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it. Um,
Did I mess anything up there? Did I miss
oh,
did I
oh,
did I get anything wrong there?
no, I think it's the first time I've heard somebody say that out loud, kind of looking directly at me, I think. And that's pretty interesting to hear. It really is, it's funny to say to be that like a lifelong dream of being a CEO of a software company, but it is really kind of what I've wanted to do my entire life, as boring as it may sound. But I'm really excited to be here and really, I kind of, I don't know if you say flattered, everyone says humbled, and I always wonder why, but it is humbling to to be here and think, man, I have a lot to learn, to be able to do this effectively. So,
Well, let's talk about that. And first, let's talk about a little bit about the road to getting to be a CEO. Where did you come from, and what was the path to getting to where you're at now?
yeah, wow. So if I go way
And
back,
don't
yeah,
start when you're 2 years old.
I won't go that far back. I'll go like
Okay.
25 years back. I originally went to school, went to Virginia Tech, go Hokies, and I went for computer science. And so I started out. I come from an engineering family, and I started out really just wanting to know how to program, and that's what I learned there. Got a bit of a business background as well, and I really just gravitated towards the customer side. But funnily enough, I didn't start in software directly after school. I was heavy into running triathlons, and I was working part time for this construction company, just doing day labor, if you can believe it. Ended up becoming a
Really?
part owner of that company, running a construction company for 7 years or so in my 20s. Built a software application for that company and thought about taking it to market right around 2007. And if you know anything about the housing market
Oh
in
yeah.
2007, 2008, not a great time to launch a
Yeah.
construction focused piece of software, especially residential wise. So got out of that business down in Virginia, moved to New York, and really got into the software side of things directly for the last like 20 years. So,
What is it that led you to where you're at now as far as Dream Data,
mhm.
CEO, et cetera?
Yeah. Well, you when I moved to New York, you start out pretty simply in a sales role. So I was selling software there. Um, Kind of quickly worked my way up into leadership, and I've done all aspects of sales. I think I've done what in our business you would call like renewals and upsells and new business. And so I've done a lot of that. And then I eventually worked my way up into actually leading not just sales teams, but also some marketing teams. So kind of from that initial like account executive role all the way up to several chief revenue officer roles over the last 10 years or so.
And what about how'd you get into Dream Data? That because it's a Martech, and I want to hear. Tell me about how you got there. Like, what? How'd you become CEO? And then tell us a little bit about what the company does.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, so interestingly, like Dream Data is a Danish company, so based in Copenhagen. I was the first hire in the U.S. And I came about it as people often do, just through a recruiter outreach, and got to know the founders. Really hit it off with them. Loved the culture of the company, and I really love what they're building. When I look at a company and I'm thinking about joining it like, maybe 25 years ago, I used to know how to code. Now I don't know anything about it. And so if there's a product problem, I'm not your guy. Like, I can't do anything to help you. If there's a go to market problem, maybe I think I can help fix that. And so I flew to Copenhagen after a month or two of a kind of interview process. Got to know the founders more. And by the way, it was the dead of winter. If you know Copenhagen at all, the sun comes up at like 10 a.m. in February. It sets at 4 p.m. So it was. I got to know the city a bit. But one thing I just noticed was like the usage of the product was outstanding, especially in our space. That really attracted me to it. I said, look, if there's high usage here, then there's lots of problems aside from that I think I can help to solve. And so that's how I looked at it. I kind of look at it, from a lens of like, can I help? And so in that interview process, part of it was like, look, we are considering having a CEO focused in the U.S. And if this went well for the year, we would maybe put you in that role. And so we were very fortunate, had a great product. We were able to recruit some really great people, convince them to come work with us, and we had a great year. And so we made the transition early this year, like April this year. So.
Oh, very cool. When you got hired, what were you hired to do? Were you hired to run the US?
So yes, run the US, but also run the revenue organization. And that typically means, and in our sense anyway, a typical CRO role is running like sales and post sales. So new business and post sales. And that was what I was hired to do, and also to build up the US office. And so now we got a team of about a dozen here in New York. So we've grown rapidly here. We'll grow even more rapidly after the funding round. We'll do some hiring here. We will continue to grow, I think, very well in Europe, and those are our two focus markets right now. So.
Very cool. And tell us what, for people that don't know, explain exactly in simple terms what Dreamdata does.
Yeah. Yeah. Dreamdata is a marketing attribution and activation platform for B2B marketers. And when I say B2B, I should say, we really sell to companies that sell to other companies. So we're not going to sell to like a Target or a Walmart or an Amazon or anything like that. We're going to sell to maybe other software companies, manufacturing companies, financial services, things like that. That is where we focus our efforts. It's actually it's going to sound niche if you don't know the market, but marketing attribution for consumers is very different from B2B. So that's what we solve for our customers.
When people don't know what the word marketing attribution is, describe that.
Mhm. Yeah, sure. So in B2B, a lot of times you'll have a buyer group. So you have multiple people looking at making a purchase, so considering to make a purchase, and they will come about your brand in many different ways. From say a LinkedIn ad, from a Google search ad, from an event, from a webinar, from your website, from a Google search. And what you want to understand is, which of these touch points are having the biggest impact for you, and where should you focus a lot of your marketing dollars? Specifically, I should say, like in the performance marketing arena. And so, in performance marketing, it's quite easy to track what's going on. In brand marketing, less so. And we're making lots of inroads on that front, but primarily where you see a lot of attribution focused is on the performance marketing side as opposed to the brand side. It's a big debate in the industry today.
And I know we had talked a little bit on a pre-call when we got to know each other a little bit. We talked about the impact of the world we're in today on sales. And it used to be, probably when you started your sales career, the way you went about selling and what you said and how decisions were made and how clients were educated. It's very different today. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, our data shows us that typical buyer journey right now, 211 days, and marketing owns 70% of that. And so sales is really only entering the picture at what, day 150, something like that. Um, Before, sales held all the keys. They were kind of the gatekeeper. They knew the what, they knew the why, and they had the how. What should I buy? Why should I buy it? And then how do I make that purchase? Now, like I just said, marketing owns 70% of the journey, and part of that is the internet. This is going, of course, way back, but it's been a progression. Um, and then with AI, marketers excel at automation, and they excel at the one to many relationship, getting to be the one to few. And with AI, that could be they start to excel at a one to one type of relationship. But really, that's marketing's role, and that's how they've taken over a large portion of the buyer journey. And sales is kind of what I would think of as like an anchorman, the anchor leg of the relay race. Critical to making this happen, but also a very different role. So,
How is that how is that model not model, but how is that in the industry affecting how you grow your business? Because then it's going to impact how you sell, right? That it's the
yeah.
same issue for your salespeople, right? So how is that impacting you all now?
Well, I think you have to embrace the new way that people want to buy, and that is frictionless. Don't be gatekeeper. So the way that we put our platform out there is we have a trial motion. Try before you buy. You don't have to talk to a salesperson. You can come to our website, start a trial, and then try the product. And when you're ready, talk to someone if you want to buy. Buyers want more freedom to make purchases in the way that they prefer. And if you embrace that, I think you will be part of the future. And if you don't embrace it, you're going to be left behind. You need to, again, don't fight your buyers. Uh, you know, Kind of give them the tools to make a decision, and you actually find that it's a much more pleasant experience for everybody.
So if you look at your experience from 15 years ago or whenever you were in a sales role and the way it was then, and you look at your company and how you sell today, I guess what I'm getting at is what happens to expectations of driving revenue as you've come in because you haven't been CEO that long yet. So
No.
as you come in and you start
Yep.
learning this, has that changed your mindset? Were you shocked? Were you surprised? Did you think, okay, our salespeople are just going to do it the way I used to? And then did you look, kind of,
No, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, I started at another company, same type of situation. Actually, another European company, and I helped bring them over to the US. And they had a trial motion in their product. And first thing I said, well, we're going to kill that. Just inherently, just kind of, I just part of it was I felt the product was more enterprise. Trial motions with an enterprise company
it's hard.
are
It's
can be
hard.
incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Getting access to data. Um,
Mm.
they want the handholding, and so I saw the product as much more enterprise. And we focused on that route, and that's the path I took then. And so when I first looked at Dreamdata, and was looking at the motion, I was like, I wonder what that does to our sales cycle, like an operations focused CRO might do. How do I come in and help shorten the sales cycle? But actually, that would have been a bad thing because the way the market is today, there's you want to make sure that you can deliver on the promise that you're making in the sale. And if we can show you that we can deliver on that promise during the sale, it is just much more effective. And it's also more effective on retention of customers, and that's really key to any software companies today.
Yeah, absolutely. As you look at your leadership journey, especially over the last number of months here, what's the biggest leadership lesson you've learned as your organization's doubled since you've been here, or at least doubled?
Yeah, I think my son asked me, like, I was telling my son that I was about to take a trip to Copenhagen. That was actually probably the toughest thing of becoming CEO. I Yeah, I often tell my kids like the day of that I'm leaving to go on a trip, because if I tell them a few days before, they're asking me constantly, "Are you leaving yet? Are you leaving yet?" And they're sad about it, and so I tell
And
them,
they're how old? Hang on. They're how old?
5 and 7. Yeah.
Okay, that's important to know
So
because if they're 22 and 24, that's a different deal.
right. No, five, sorry, 5 and
Okay,
7.
5 and 7.
Yeah, and he asked me a tough question. He asked me a tough question I've had, which was, uh, I said, "Look, I'm going to Copenhagen. They're gonna offer me this role, and I'm probably gonna take it." And he didn't like that I traveled. He said, "Well, what if you say no?" I was like, "Oh, that was crushing," because I know why he asked me that, because he didn't want me to travel so much. And then we made an agreement. I got him an iPad. He could text me whenever he wanted. We could do FaceTime, and it worked out just fine. And he's happy. But he also asked me, he said, so what's the role? I said, well, it's CEO. And he said, oh, does that mean you're like the boss? And after just in my like short experience, after like thinking about it, I was like, well, that's what a lot of people think. Like, you get to make all the decisions. And it's really not true. I think uh I was also, I think, culturally, like from a Danish perspective, it's a very flat style organization for companies in Copenhagen, and I wanted to make sure I could try to embody that as much as I could, give people the ability to make their own decisions, and so yeah, so there is this viewpoint, like people think about getting to CEO, and you think, well, now I get to make all the calls, I get to make all the decisions, and actually, it's more like, how do I make sure I can empower other people to make decisions, so I'm not a roadblock, and also so people are growing. So I think that's maybe the counterintuitive thing, or the hardest lesson that I need to learn in terms of getting better at this job.
Would you say is that one of the biggest surprises, or is there something else that has been a big surprise for you since stepping
Hmm.
into the role of CEO?
Um, I can't think of a ton of surprises I've had
Well, think of it as
here.
expectation, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
was there an expectation coming in, and then you realize, wait, this is different than I thought. Was it what you just shared with me? Or is there something else, perhaps?
Well, in my particular situation, things happen pretty quickly. Um, as soon as I kind of took the role, we decided we would go out and do a fundraise, and those things take time. And it wasn't what I expected in terms of, oh, I have these I have this job of like basically managing a board, managing a fundraise process, still acting as CRO because we hadn't made a hire there yet, and we're still actually on the hunt there. And so it was much more, I guess the projects I had to take on were interesting. I would say the other thing that was really an adjustment for me was on the relationship side. And so in my situation, we had, first off, Lars, who was our CEO. He now leads our product team. One of the best humans I've ever met. Like, just we have an amazing relationship. I have dinner with his family whenever I go to Copenhagen. Um, but your relationships become a little bit more ambiguous, I think. So for example, there we have two founders here still, and they report to me, but I also have a lot of deference for them because this is their company, and that's how I've always looked at it. Like, I am not a founder here. This is your baby, and how do I steward it in the best way possible so that you have a great outcome? And then you have the same situation. So like Lars is both our chief product officer, is on my team. He is also on the board as a board member. And so he reports to me and I report to him. And so there's a lot
Oh,
of
weird.
ambiguity in that. And it happens the same, I think, with investors on your board as well, because they want to do everything they can do to help you to succeed. Um, but you're also beholden to the things that they expect. So I think it's ambiguity in relationship. I come like my father was in the army. Um, I grew up in like a military area of Virginia. I'm used to hierarchy, and so ambiguity in relationships was something that I'm still having to get very used to having as part of this role.
How is that impacting how you lead, not those individuals, but the rest of the team, especially here in the US?
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely. I would say it's definitely different. It's also different for different types of teams. For example, like a product team is much more of like a creative endeavor. It's as compared to like go to market, you want to set up kind of best practices in a playbook that everyone will follow. And if you set up a playbook when you're trying to build product, there are certain things that are playbook like, in terms of like the steps you take and what you do in engineering. And I'm learning a lot about this now from James, our CTO, and from Lars. And I still have a ton to learn on that front. But it's different both from the team perspective, because everything in the US is go to market, by the way. That's why I make that distinction. Um, but it's also culturally different from leading in the US versus, say, in Copenhagen. And I think we do a good job of bridging that gap. We are a global company. We have 50 employees. We have 23 nationalities right now.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah, and so we purposefully built it to be a very like diverse organization. Copenhagen and New York are, of course, very international cities, so that lends itself to that approach. Um, so it's yeah, we try to be very diverse, and that means like a diversity of how you lead people.
Love that. Love that. I
Yeah.
want to shift gears just a little bit. And, I always think like our podcast is called, Inside the Leader's Mind. And the tagline is what's in the way becomes the way.
Mhm.
What is something earlier in your career that literally was in your way? And because of that, it has now become the way. So some like an obstacle
Mhm.
that you hit and it's like this has allowed me to become even better.
Oh man,
You can think for a
I've
moment.
had a lot of obstacles for sure. I mean,
You can pick up if there's a few, you can pick a few or one.
I think failure for sure is got to be the biggest one. I think how you fail is so important. It's much more important than how you win because you're generally going to fail a lot more, especially in sales. If you're closing at a 20%, 25% rate, that's great, but it means you're losing at 75% of the time. So how you fail is really important. Um, and what I mean by that is how do you recover from that failure? And so, I would always be super frustrated with failure. And then, I've told this story a few times, like same thing. I'll use my kids a lot because I learned so much from them. Like my oldest son, really amazing reader. And so he's good at that. He thinks he should be good at everything. He should pick everything up like he picked up reading. And so I finally said, and I said, listen, Colin, I fail I make at least 10 mistakes a day. And then for the next like 3 or 4 months, he's asking me, Daddy, what did you do wrong today? And and that's a good
Love that.
reflection point, but on on how I teach him. But so I think being willing to accept that you're going to fail. And Lars actually, said something really smart recently as we were going through like a company value session. Lars, he said, "Look, failure. It's okay to fail small. Can't fail big." I thought that was. I don't know why that was so enlightening to me to hear that. And I don't know if that came from him thinking in a more of like a product way, as opposed to my mind is more like a go to market kind of playbook type way. Um, when he said that, something just really clicked for me about making sure that you fail small and you don't fail big. So
Now it makes me think of two different things. One is, Kaizen, right, which is the continuous improvement. And when Deming went over to Japan, instead of waiting till the end of the line of cars and
mhm,
then waiting till the car comes out, and then you realize, oh crap, it's messed up, and you start all over. Instead, it was, hey, we made a mistake along the way, fix it, make it a mistake, fix it, make a mistake. So it's continuous improvement. And
right,
that's what I take away from the comment you made is the little failures are really the fact that you're taking a risk, but you're learning along the way, hopefully, right?
right,
And then I think you and I chatted about this too. I love the story of Sarah Blakely, who is the founder of Spanx, and she
mhm,
talks about her company's worth billion planet whatever, and she said when she would
sure,
get home, sitting around the dinner table, her dad would get excited and say, "Hey, what'd you fail at this week?" And it was the encouragement of failure because what failure taught them is you learn by failing. Or
right,
as I say, fail forward faster, fearlessly, which is the whole idea of every time we fail, we're taking a step forward and you're learning. So it's kind of the Kaizen
yeah,
thought,
absolutely,
y- you know. I
yep,
think I think that's really a cool thought here. What about especially in the role you're in, you think about the role you're in. Um, can you think of a recent situation where you felt yourself really stretched as a leader, other than the ambiguity with the board and et cetera, but maybe stretched in communication, maybe it was speed of execution, maybe it was clarity. maybe
Mhm.
people performance?
Yeah. I think, I think when you have a binary decision to make, like, basically, let's say you've got a clash on the exec team or a clash on any team, honestly, and you can't there's no compromise. It's kind of like a fork in the road. Basically, you're going to go left, you're going to go right, and you've got to make a decision on that. And someone said something. I don't know. I'm not endorsing this, but it's just made me think. Where I heard something recently saying, "Look, if you're a CEO and you're not making any controversial decisions, then what value are you adding?" Um, I
Interesting.
don't. I don't know if that is right or wrong, but that I've thought about that a lot recently. And so when you have a binary decision, um, it's going to cause controversy because you end up with, some people want to do it this way, some people want to do it the other way, and you have to you may have to make a call to say we're going to do it this way, and do your best to, of course, explain to the people that didn't want to do it that way that here's why this is better, here's why we think we should go this route, and why it's better for the company or better for the team. So, um, so that stretches me a lot because I would like to please everyone. I think, you have to recognize that you can't do that. And I think, but especially for my team, I would like to make sure that the entire team is happy. But you can't always do that. And you have to
It,
make a decision for maybe the greater good. So,
it's tough. It's tough. And I think becoming better at making decisions and being confident in decision is definitely a challenge for a lot of leaders, especially newer leaders in these roles. What's an area, if you were to peg an area and you say, okay, this is one area, if I'm being really vulnerable, of leadership,
okay.
managing people, what's an area you say this is an area I got to get much better at if to grow this business?
Yeah, making decisions with very little information. Um, you Um, I've been told in the past that I make very quick decisions, um, and um, and then that's probably part of failing. I'll make a quick decision and say, "Oh, I screwed that up. Okay, we're going to go a different direction and fix that now." Um, and so I think I think it's really making larger decisions with even less information, especially with things that you don't have control over, like macroeconomic situations. You can't control what's going to happen with I don't know, currency exchange rate. That's big for us. Currency exchange is a big thing for us because we're a European company that operates also in the US. I have no control over that. I can make an estimate of what's going to happen. Sorry, this is a little boring, but I think, things like that, I'll think of a more exciting example if I can, but things like that where you're making a decision, trying to take into account things that you just don't have a lot of control over. Um, that's tough for me, and I need to get more confidence in that area.
Yeah, I could see how that could be a challenge. What advice would you have? And I love this because you haven't been doing this 30 years as a
Okay.
CEO. Because I think when I've asked this question to CEOs who have been doing it forever, they
Mhm.
forget what it was like when they started. So
Okay.
I love that you're in this role. So let's say you have someone who is in another VP, senior VP, maybe they were CRO, or CIO or CFO. Anyway, doesn't matter. They were in a role,
Yeah, yeah.
and then they move into a CEO role. What do you think will be the biggest eye opener for them moving from where they're at to that role? What do you think the biggest blind spots can be when they get there?
Yeah. Well, don't act like you've been there before because you haven't. I think, the reason you'll fail, the reason I think a lot of things fail, companies, people, uh, uh, deals, like sales deals, is arrogance. And arrogance, I think, is a huge enemy. And so, for example, like the first thing I did was I went to a small group. It's a community called Pavilion, and I immediately signed up for a small group CEO kind of coaching session that I could have. First thing I did, and I told the board immediately, and I was a little nervous about telling them. I was like, "What if they think, oh, Nick doesn't think he knows what he's doing. Why is he doing this? He's going out to learn. He clearly."
Losing all confidence.
Exactly, exactly. and they were incredibly supportive. And so I think, you need to accept the fact that you haven't been there before and that you can learn from anybody. So lose the arrogance. Like, there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. Everybody knows that, but
Right.
please don't be arrogant. It will kill your company, um, in one way or another, so.
And is there way, way, way more of a fire hose than you expected? Meaning things coming because when you're a CRO, it's a lot more clear cut of what you're trying to accomplish.
Mhm.
But when you move into a CEO role and you have all the responsibility, was that kind of surprising? Do you think that can be overwhelming for someone that moves into a new role?
Yeah. I think I don't actually look at them as being too different. The difference, I mean, the role of, a CEO or a C-suite or exec team, I think, is just to build value for the company, and you do that by making sure your customers love you, your team loves you, and you run a great organization. And so, um, like the things that I lost my train of thought here, but um, I get, yeah, the difference is the time frames. It's the time frames. And so if you are a CRO, you're very much thinking in terms of this quarter and next quarter. Maybe a few more out, depending on the size of the company. It all depends on a few things. Um, the goals I think are similar, but I have to think on a longer time horizon. And I also think that the other things that I don't know a lot about, like when I came into the role, I said, "Hey, there's two things that I'm going to suck at, and that's going to be finance, and that's going to be product." And so I need really, really smart people, to help me on the team, to help me on finance, to help me on a lot of other things too, of course, because there's always going to be someone that knows more about it than I do, I think. And so, so I think that is how I've dealt with like the fire hose is having people that you trust on the team that can
That was
handle
the
it.
word that
So,
that was the word that actually came to mind is that yeah, being able to trust others
yes. Yeah, yeah.
because now it's not just you, right? And it's even bigger,
Yeah.
right? You move up, it's
Yeah.
even bigger. So
But at the same time, like
awesome.
I'm a very curious person and I took the role for a reason. I took it because I wanted to learn about these things. So,
Love it. Last question. I love, I like to end with this. What's the question you wish people would ask you, but
mhm.
they don't know to ask you, but you secretly wish someone would ask you this question?
Yeah, I think, this is maybe industry heavy. I don't know, but everyone is talking about automation. How can we just automate that away and not have to think about it? And use AI to just make that happen without me doing anything. And people don't ask, well, what shouldn't I automate? And that's actually in leadership. If you're going to like, to me, leadership is a lot about coaching and how do you bring people up from, just graduating from college up to the point where, hey, I want them to be a CEO one day. How do I make that happen for them? Um, and so there are certain things, in terms of how I think that you shouldn't automate because it's going to hurt critical thinking. If you're just inputting a question into ChatGPT or saying, "Hey, I got this email. Can you respond to it?" And then it just does it for you. How much do you actually know about what just happened? And how much did you actually learn when you have something that's just doing it for you? So I'm actually a big proponent of certain things in our company of not being automated and actually making
Interesting.
people have to think about it. So I do something that I'm sure annoys. We got Laura and Santa, they're amazing. They're on the sales team. I have them send a handwritten, a hand built report every week, um, because I think it helps with critical thinking on it. Obviously, it's for my benefit to inform me about what's going on in the organization, but I also think it's a great benefit for anybody to have to think through your week at the end of the week and say, all right, what did I do that went great? What did we screw up? And then, what do I need to do next week? So those things are that's something that I think is really important right now. Because there's a lot of questions around what happens to entry level positions if AI is automating them away. And I think if you're going to continue to bring people up in an organization, You've got to think, how do I make sure they're still thinking critically, um, and and learning.
Love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost every conversation I have with almost every CEO now, automation, AI, that is always coming up. And I love the way you describe that because it is true. When I do something manually,
Uh-huh.
as opposed to automated, AI and stuff, it does make me think differently. Um, and it's fascinating now that I hadn't really thought about it until you just said that. And I
Mm,
love that. I think that's really cool. That's really
thank you.
cool.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Good.
well, Chris, if someone wants to learn more about what you all do, what is the best way for them to learn more
Well, I
or
mean,
get in
our
touch?
website, go to dreamdata.io. You can find us there. I love talking to people one on one. So if you're a B2B marketer and you want to talk to me about what we're doing, I've got actually a Calendly link on my LinkedIn profile. Just go book time and I'll talk to you. Would love to. So
Love that. Love that. Well, Nick, thank you so much for being with me. Enjoyed the conversation and I'm fascinated, excited for your CEO position. I'm excited for your 55 million in funding. So congratulations and thanks for being here.
thanks, David. I appreciate it.
Folks, this is Inside the Leader's Mind, and I'm David Susan. And if you enjoyed it, please share it, subscribe, let other people know. Uh, thank you so much for being with me. Nick, thank you again.
Thank you.
And folks, we'll see you next time.